I never imagined I would mark my 68th birthday by sleeping in a derelict garage, the air thick with the ghosts of motor oil and stale dust. Yet there I was, under a starless Chicago sky, my hand trembling as I fumbled with an unfamiliar key. Tears blurred the rusted lock as my son's words, sharp and cruel, echoed in my mind. "You're just a useless old woman, Mom. What would you even do with a real inheritance? Dad knew that." The key finally turned, and the ancient door groaned open with a shudder. My flashlight's beams sliced through the darkness, landing on something that made me freeze, my breath catching in my throat. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be what Arthur had meant when his will left me nothing but the garage and its contents. To understand how I found myself homeless on my birthday, clutching a single suitcase that held the remnants of a 42-year marriage, we must go back 3 weeks. I was in our family attorney's office, standing beside my son, Julian. He was immaculate in his tailored suit, a stark contrast to me in the simple black dress I'd worn to Arthur's funeral. Mr. Davies, our lawyer for decades, seemed unusually tense as he prepared to read my husband's will. "Before I begin," he announced, adjusting his glasses, "I want to assure you that everything is legally binding and precisely as Mr. Vance instructed." In retrospect, that was a clear warning. The reading was a blur, but the devastating phrases cut through the haze. "To my son, Julian Vance, I leave our penthouse residence on Lakeshore Drive and my primary investment portfolio." There was a pause, and then, almost as an afterthought, "To my beloved wife, Eleanor Vance, I leave the property located at 3515 Freightline Avenue, the garage and its contents." A garage. After 42 years, my husband had left me a garage? Julian's face, moments before a mask of solemn grief, morphed into one of poorly concealed triumph. His hand squeezed my shoulder a little too hard. "Don't worry, Mom. I'll make sure you're taken care of." I was too stunned to speak, too lost in a whirlwind of confusion. Why would Arthur do this? Where would I live? The answers came with brutal clarity that evening. Julian drove me back to the penthouse, the home Arthur and I had shared for 15 years, its windows overlooking the vast expanse of Lake Michigan. I had barely stepped inside when Julian set my suitcase down by the door. "I think it would be best if you found somewhere else to stay, Mom." I stared at him, unable to process his words. "What do you mean?" "The penthouse is mine now. It's in the will," he said, his voice taking on the polished, rehearsed quality he used in business deals. "I'm having some colleagues over tomorrow to discuss turning Dad's study into a home office. I need to start making changes." "But where am I supposed to go?" The question was a bewildered whisper. Julian shrugged, a gesture of casual dismissal that shattered me. "You could stay with your sister for a while, or there's always that garage Dad left you." A cruel edge, one I'd never heard before, sharpened his laugh. "Though why he left you that dump is beyond me. What are you going to do with it? Open a mechanic shop at your age?" It was then that he delivered the final, crushing blow, the words that would haunt me as I drove aimlessly through the city, eventually finding myself on a dark, unfamiliar street in an industrial district. "You're just a useless old woman, Mom. What would you even do with a real inheritance? Dad knew that." The cruelty was so unexpected, so alien to the son I thought I'd raised, that I couldn't respond. I simply took my suitcase, my purse, and the key Mr. Davies had given me, and walked out of the life I had known, which brought me here, to the threshold of this forgotten garage, my flashlight revealing the impossible. The space wasn't filled with junk or old tools. Before me stood 3 vehicles, each draped in a custom-fitted cloth cover, arranged with meticulous care. But it was the object at the front that stopped my heart. The unmistakable silver grille of a vintage Aston Martin, its polished chrome catching my light like a beacon. What was this? And why had Arthur kept it a secret for all these years? My fingers trembled as I pulled the cover from the Aston Martin. A 1964 DB5 in pristine silver birch gleamed as if it had just rolled off the factory floor. "Arthur," I whispered into the silence, "what on earth were you doing?" I moved to the next vehicle. A 1956 Mercedes-Benz 300 SL Gullwing in a deep, immaculate blue emerged, its distinctive doors like folded wings. The third was a Ferrari, a 1967 275 GTB4, its color the rich, intense red of the wine Arthur always ordered on our anniversaries. Beside each car was a leather portfolio filled with documentation, provenance papers, maintenance records, purchase agreements. Even to my untrained eye, it was clear these weren't just old cars. They were museum-quality treasures. That's when I saw it. An envelope taped to the wall, my name written in Arthur's unmistakable hand. My fingers, still shaking, found the nearby light switch. Modern LED fixtures flooded the space with brilliant light, revealing a professionally finished, climate-controlled automotive sanctuary with custom flooring and advanced security systems. This was an abandoned building. It was a fortress designed to protect priceless art. I sank onto a leather bench and opened the letter. "My dearest Eleanor," it began, "if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you've discovered what I've come to think of as my final gift to you. I am so sorry for the shock and confusion you must be feeling. The secrecy was never meant to hurt you, but to protect what I was building for your future." He went on to explain his diagnosis 6 years ago, progressive heart failure. He knew his time was limited and had begun planning to ensure my security after he was gone.
I know you are wondering about the will, about why I would leave our home to Julian. Believe me, this decision caused me more sleepless nights than my health ever did. But over the past decade, I've watched our son change. The ambitious boy we raised has become harder, more calculating. The truth is, I feared what would happen if I left everything to you jointly. He would have found a way to control the assets, to manage your portion for your own good, as he would say. I've seen how he dismisses your opinions and needs when he thinks I'm not listening. A tear splashed onto the page. I hadn't realized Arthur had seen those small, painful interactions I'd always excused. So I created this split inheritance with deliberate intentions. Julian has received what he sees as the valuable portion, the penthouse, the visible investments, the status symbols. But what you are looking at now, my love, is the real wealth. These 3 cars alone are worth approximately $12 million. The documentation will confirm their provenance. You'll find the contact information for Alistair Finch, my trusted advisor for these acquisitions. He can help you with whatever you decide to do. $12 million. I looked up at the silent, gleaming machines, my head spinning. But the cars are just the beginning. In the safe behind the photograph of us in Venice, the combination is our anniversary, you'll find documentation for several investment properties I've acquired over the past 6 years, all placed in a living trust that transferred to you upon my death. You'll also find banking information for accounts that will provide you with a comfortable income for the rest of your life. I found the photo, my hand shaking as I entered our anniversary date. The safe clicked open, revealing a thick portfolio. The total value at the bottom of the first page made my ears ring. Apartment buildings in Seattle, commercial property in Denver, a small vineyard in Northern California. I returned to the letter. I know this is overwhelming. I wanted to give Julian a chance to show his true character. Perhaps, faced with his inheritance and responsibility for you, he would rise to the occasion. But if he has revealed a different nature, well, then this legacy is your protection, your independence, your freedom. Character reveals itself at moments of inheritance. Julian is receiving a test, and you, my love, are receiving the means to live the remainder of your life exactly as you choose, beholden to no one. All my love, now and always, Arthur. I clutched the letter, sobs shaking my body. My husband had seen it all. He had anticipated Julian's cruelty and built me a fortress against it. Just hours ago, my son had thrown me out, calling me useless. How wrong he was about everything. The next morning, after a night spent on a sofa in the garage's small hidden office, I called Alistair Finch. He arrived 2 hours later, a distinguished, silver-haired man in a tweed jacket. He gently explained Arthur's strategy. He said cars were tangible, beautiful assets that brought joy, Alistair recalled. He wanted to leave you something you could see and touch, not just numbers on a statement. As I spent the next day poring over the documents from the safe, one deed caught my eye. A modest but lovely cottage in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, a town we had always loved. Arthur had purchased it 4 years ago, fully furnished and ready for me. I had a home. That evening, Julian called, his voice laced with irritation, not concern. "Mom, where are you? I need you to come pick up the rest of your things. I'm having designers start work tomorrow." No apology, just demands. A strange calm settled over me. I thought of the documents, spread before me, proof of Arthur's profound love. "I'll be there," I said. And after hanging up, I scheduled appointments with both a lawyer and a financial advisor. I was no longer the woman who had left the penthouse in a state of shock. I was the keeper of Arthur's legacy, and I would honor it by being strong. The next morning, when Julian let me into the penthouse, the space already felt cold and alien. Family photos were gone, and boxes of Arthur's belongings were piled in a corner. "I kept the Rolex and his cufflink collection," Julian said casually. "The rest is just clothes and old man stuff. You can take what you want, the rest is going to charity." Old man stuff. The phrase was a physical blow. Inside the boxes were Arthur's beloved books, his fountain pens, the sweater I'd given him last Christmas. As I sorted through these treasures, Julian paced impatiently. "Can't you hurry this up? It's just stuff, Mom. You don't even have a place to put it all." "I have a place," I said quietly, my voice steady, "and I'll take as much time as I need." Before leaving, I found Arthur's old leather messenger bag tucked away in a closet. Inside was a sealed envelope containing backup copies of everything in the garage safe. My clever, thorough husband. I drove away from the city that day, heading for the coastal highway toward Lake Geneva, a strange feeling of liberation washing over me. For the first time since Arthur's death, I was moving toward something new. The cottage in Lake Geneva was a sanctuary. Hidden behind cypress trees, it radiated charm and privacy. The interior was filled with details chosen just for me. Bookshelves, my favorite colors, and above a writing desk, a watercolor replica of the spot in Venice where Arthur had proposed, a piece we'd lost years ago. He had created this space with such love, even arranging for a neighbor, Beatrice, to welcome me with a casserole and the offer of friendship. Arthur hadn't just provided financial security, he'd considered my emotional well-being, too.
A few days later, Julian called, his tone impatient. He had been going through Arthur's papers and found cryptic references to other investments. "I thought you might know something about it," he probed.
Your father handled most of our finances, I replied, the statement being technically true. I told him I needed time away and wouldn't be discussing my whereabouts. He was frustrated, but I held firm. The cottage, like Arthur's love, had given me the space and security to finally trust my own judgment again. 2 weeks later, I found a luxury SUV parked in my driveway. Julian stood on my doorstep, his expression a mixture of triumph and accusation. "Found you," he said. "Care to explain how you're suddenly a property owner in one of the most exclusive towns in the Midwest?" He had hired a private investigator, framing it as a welfare check on an elderly parent who vanished after showing signs of confusion. The manipulation was stunning, but he had found more than the cottage. "I visited the garage yesterday, Mom," he said, his voice hardening. "I saw enough to know there are cars in there, vintage cars worth significantly more than that penthouse Dad left me." The moment I had been dreading had arrived. He felt cheated, rejected, and furious. So I made a decision. I went to the study and returned with a copy of Arthur's letter. "Your father loved you, Julian," I said. "Nothing in his actions was meant to hurt you." I watched as he read, his expression shifting from disbelief to a dark, simmering rage. "So Dad thought I was what? Too materialistic to be trusted?" He spat, his voice rising. "He tested me like some lab rat to see if I'd pass his twisted moral examination?" He threatened to contest the will, but I stood my ground, armed with the knowledge from my new lawyer, Catherine Sterling. "The legal structures your father created are impeccable, Julian. Your father's letter gave me discretion about sharing these assets with you. Your behavior since his death, particularly toward me, will influence those decisions." The blunt assessment landed like a slap. He stared at me as if I were a stranger. Perhaps I was. The compliant mother he'd always taken for granted was gone. He stormed out, vowing the fight wasn't over, but I knew Arthur had given me all the protection I needed. 3 months later, his assistant arrived at my door. Julian was in financial ruin. The penthouse renovations had uncovered massive structural issues, costing double the estimates, and a high-risk investment had failed spectacularly. He was facing foreclosure and needed my help. I drove to Chicago and found the penthouse gutted, a chaotic mess of exposed wiring and abandoned equipment. Julian looked haggard and defeated. He admitted he'd overextended, driven by pride and stubbornness. "I'm willing to help, Julian," I told him, "but not unconditionally." The next day, on my patio in Lake Geneva, I laid out my terms: complete financial transparency, professional oversight of any funds I provided, and most importantly, he had to make amends for how he had treated me. I'm not offering help purely as a financial transaction. I'm offering it as a mother who believes her son can be better than his recent behavior suggests. He hesitated, but faced with total ruin, he eventually agreed. "I'll do it," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of his defeat. "All of it." The following months were a difficult journey. The penthouse was sold, clearing most of his debts. Julian began therapy, and slowly our relationship began to heal, rebuilt on a foundation of honesty rather than habit. 4 months after that tense meeting, he visited the cottage. He was changed, less polished, more relaxed, and with a warmth in his eyes I hadn't seen in years. He had taken a new job with a community development organization, building affordable housing, work he found genuinely meaningful. He brought me a small box containing Arthur's cufflinks and something else, my original wedding band, which I had thought was lost. With it was a jeweler's receipt for an anniversary gift Arthur had commissioned but never had the chance to give me. Julian had picked it up. Inside a small box was a delicate eternity band of sapphires and diamonds. As I slipped the new band on my finger next to the original, tears streamed down my face. "Thank you," I whispered to my son, the words carrying a universe of meaning. That evening, I took the Aston Martin out for a drive along the winding lakeside roads. The setting sun turned the water to molten gold. My hands, adorned with the plain gold band of a promise made and jeweled circle of a life fulfilled, guided the wheel with a confidence I never knew I possessed. The worthless garage that had once symbolized my son's dismissal had become the key that unlocked not just my financial independence, but a new, more honest relationship with him and, most importantly, with myself. Arthur's final gift wasn't the money or the cars. It was the chance for both of us to find our true worth. As I turned toward home, my home, I felt a profound sense of peace. The journey had been painful, but it had led me here to a new beginning, guided by the wisdom of a love that planned for my future even when it could no longer be part of it.